Mac moved to the rail, climbing over. "You're nuts, pal." Mac jumped in. Bud watched him swim away from the magnate. "See you in hell." He put the magnum in his mouth and squeezed the trigger, blowing his brains out the back of his skull. Through DuPont's glasses, Leon Barr saw the dorsal fin surface next to the crippled yacht. "I think we should go now, Captain." The trawler's twin engines growled to life. Coughing blue smoke, the boat raced to shore. A half-mile away, the female whipped her head around, her instincts gone mad. She accelerated in pursuit. Jonas was exhausted. Whale blubber and other debris were compressing in the stomach, pushing hard against his back. He refused to look, afraid to see what or who it might be. The tooth finally sliced through the 6-inch thick lining, and Jonas pushed his head and arms through the slit. Having exited the stomach, he found himself in a totally different environment. The cardiac chamber was very tight, a fleshy crawl space no more than a foot high. Jonas squeezed his body prone into the space, wedging his back against a layer of striated muscle. It gave. He crawled forward, one hand holding the flashlight, the other gripping the tooth, heading in the direction of the bass drum that pounded louder in his brain. The chamber began widening, the heartbeat getting stronger, vibrating the fleshy walls around Jonas. And then he saw it in the beam of light, a throbbing 5-foot rounded mass of muscle suspended by thick cords of blood vessels. The fishing trawler closed to within 100 yards of the beach as the megalodon surfaced a mere 20 feet behind. The passengers held on, unable to muster the mental fortitude to survive yet another attack. With a sickening burst of speed, the female rammed the source of the vibrations, crushing the shafts of the twin engines. The propellers stopped churning and the crippled trawler drifted powerless only 50 yards from shore. "Son of a bitch!" the captain screamed. "This is your fault, Frenchie. You're going to pay big time for this." The Meg surfaced, circling 20 feet away. She closed, approaching the port side of the trawler and pushing her snout against the hull. The ship rose out of the water at a 30-degree angle. DeMarco, Terry, and 4 crewmen slid along the deck. They had nothing to grab hold of but each other. The Meg continued raising the left side of the ship higher and higher, pushing the vessel back out to sea. 2 of the crewmen managed to find purchase on the boat's tuna net, but Terry, Adashek, and the 4 other crewmen tumbled overboard. The Meg heard the splash and felt the thrashing vibrations along her lateral line. She stopped pushing, allowing the trawler's hull to collapse back into the water. She circled, spiraling into the Monterey Bay Canyon, the icy depths allowing her to quench the burning sensation within as she prepared to attack once more. Jonas held tightly to the thick cords of the megalodon's cardiac blood vessels. He felt the hot liquid coursing through the aorta as the monstrous heart pounded against his chest, growing louder now, beating faster. Suddenly, the megalodon dived, toppling Jonas forward. Terry was too exhausted to swim. She hovered in the water, suspended above the waves by her life vest. Adashek was near, attempting to pull her toward the boat. Circling in 1,500 feet of water, the female sensed her prey escaping even as the burning within became tolerable. The megalodon streaked to the surface, her never-ending hunger compelling her to attack. She opened her jaws to the cold seawater, closing to within 1,000 feet of her prey. Adashek tugged at Terry, drawing her close to the boat. DuPont tossed a ring buoy as the 2 other men climbed back on board. 600 feet. Jonas hacked at the aorta, meeting little resistance. Warm blood spurted in 1,000 directions, coating the flashlight and his mask. The 3-foot-wide chamber went dark, and Jonas trembled involuntarily. The walls closed in once more. 400 feet. Terry and Adashek were close to the side of the trawler now, the hands of several crewmen reaching down to the water, pulling the reporter out first. Terry lifted her arm, straining to reach her rescuers, kicking as best she could to keep from sinking. 200 feet. Andre DuPont looked down into the sea and saw the luminescent glow approach. "Get her out, quickly!" he yelled. Terry looked toward the abyss, saw the fluorescent figure appear against the blackness below. The Meg was rising directly beneath her. A shot of adrenaline coursed through her body, pushing her upward. She stretched her hand higher, grabbing a crewman's wrist. 100 feet. The female's upper jaw, teeth, gums, and connective tissue emerged from under the snout, projecting forward and away from the skull. The eyes, blind, rolled protectively back in the creature's head. The Meg would consume its prey in one gargantuan bite. 50 feet. Terry Tanaka felt her slick palm slide down the crewman's arm. Desperately, she reached up with her other hand, lost her balance, and fell back into the sea. Jonas Taylor could not maintain a grip on the slippery cords. From the angle of the cardiac chamber, he realized the Meg was rising, probably to attack. He thought of Terry. Wrapping the crook of his left arm around the bundle of cords, he braced his bare feet against the soft tissues of the chamber walls above him and, inverted, pulled the beating muscle downward with all his might. His right hand tightened its grip on the tooth. With one powerful slash, he cut into the cords. 12 feet from the surface, upper jaw hideously hyperextended, the megalodon slowed. Nocturnal eyes bulging forward, all muscles frozen. The only movements came from her powerful caudal fin, which twitched involuntarily. In total darkness, Jonas lay on his back, covered in warm blood that continued cascading down upon him in buckets. On his heaving chest, like an enormous tree trunk, lay the detached heart of the 40,000-pound megalodon. Jonas struggled to breathe steadily into the regulator, hyperventilating from his effort. The drums had stopped, but the chamber was engorged with blood. Jonas wriggled out from beneath the massive organ and cast about for his flashlight. His fingers felt something hard. Yes, the light. He wiped the lens, but the beam was barely perceptible. On all fours, inching through a cascade of blood, he began crawling back toward the stomach. Terry Tanaka had expected to die. When death did not come, she opened her eyes. The megalodon's mouth hung open below her, descending. Blood surfaced in gouts, pooling around Terry's lower body. "Terry, grab the rope," said DeMarco. "Al, I'm okay. Throw me a mask, quickly." DuPont grabbed a snorkel and mask and tossed them to her. She pulled the mask over her head, positioned the mouthpiece, and peered below. Through the scarlet-tinted brine, Terry saw a river of blood pouring out of the megalodon's mouth as it continued to sink. The caudal fin had stopped moving. Jonas had relocated the stomach, but he could not find the incision he had made. Panic. He strained to see the small circle of light coming from the flashlight. He banged the base of the light against his palm, making the beam slightly stronger. The claustrophobia sent involuntary muscular tremors rippling through his exhausted body. Finally, he spotted the incision. Jonas pushed his right leg through, followed by his head, and flopped forward, disoriented. Where was the AG-1? He plunged ahead on all fours, the strong stomach acid scorching his exposed hands and feet. The flashlight was useless now. Jonas had expected to see the sub's external light. He prayed the sub had not slipped into the intestines. The angle of the internal anatomy was too great now, the lining too slippery. Jonas lost his balance and plummeted into a mass of debris at the lower end of the stomach. His head struck something solid, the tail section of the glider. The submersible's nose had passed through the entrance of the intestines, but the tail section was too large to follow. Grabbing hold of the rear hatch with both hands, Jonas jerked his body backward, the vessel giving slightly. He dug his toes in, adrenal glands pumping, and flung his weight backward again. The nose of the sub miraculously slid out of the blocked intestinal opening, expulsed in part by hundreds of gallons of partially digested food, backing up through the digestive tract. The exterior light from the AG-1 cast an eerie, luminescent glow in the stomach, revealing the effects of the dying host. The muscular lining no longer convulsed. The undigested contents of the intestines that were backing up into the stomach and seeping into a pile actually raised the nose cone of the submersible. Jonas looked up, 20 feet above the stomach entrance, seawater poured into the esophagus, the only possible way out. Jonas dropped to his knees, bracing his shoulders beneath the nose cone of the AG-1. With all his strength, he stood up, sliding the torpedo-shaped sub sideways until it was leaning at an angle against the now vertical lining of the stomach. Blindly, Jonas relocated the tail section, now sinking beneath 3 feet of whale blubber. He dug with his arms, scooping a hole in the fat. His hands found the outer hatch and yanked it open. Squeezing through the blubber, he forced his head, then his arms, through the hatch and into the dry chamber. Finally, he managed to wriggle his entire body inside the torpedo-shaped submersible, the slick coating on his wetsuit lubricating the tight fit. Jonas secured the hatch beneath his feet, then stood upright within the 8-foot-long capsule. Directing the exterior light upward, he relocated the entrance of the stomach. With one burst of fuel left, he knew the AG-1 had to make it into the esophagus. Jonas heaved his body to his left, shifting the position of the submersible, lining up the nose cone beneath his intended target as best he could. He strapped himself into the pilot's harness, then reached toward the latch that would ignite the fuel. Turning it counterclockwise, he pulled. What little remained of the hydrogen fuel ignited, propelling the submersible upward along the stomach lining like a rocket scaling a wall. Jonas gripped the joystick, aiming for the esophageal opening. The nose of the AG-1 slipped and plunged through the lubricated entrance of the stomach and into the water-filled canal that was the creature's esophagus. Whoomp! The AG-1 slammed to a halt. The exterior light revealed a chamber immersed in seawater and blood. The dead predator's mouth was open, the sea slowly infiltrating the Meg's lifeless body. Jonas could make out the cavernous opening of the gullet looming ahead. The AG-1 could not enter the esophagus. Jonas realized the sub's wider tail fin section must have caught fast on the upper stomach's muscular lining. Jonas panicked as he felt the submersible begin to slip back into the digestive chamber whence it had come. He pulled the fuel latch again. Nothing. Jonas was out of fuel. Nothing remained to prevent the AG-1 from sliding back down into the stomach. In frustration, Jonas slammed his right fist downward, hitting a metal box, the escape pod. He tore open the lid, grabbed the lever, and pulled. The AG-1 shuddered from the detonation that separated the internal Lexan glass torpedo-shaped escape pod from the heavier tail section of the submersible. The clear cylinder was propelled through the flooded chamber of the esophagus, its positive buoyancy assisting it upward. The canal widened. The exterior light, attached to the base of the escape pod, illuminated the internal arches of the megalodon's gullet that supported the cavernous chamber like the walls of an underwater cathedral. The escape pod shot upward, spinning out of control in a twisting funnel of water and blood. The buoyant cylinder continued to rise, approaching the open maw of the dead Meg. Only one thing could halt Jonas Taylor's exit from his 20-ton prison. Looming ahead, the megalodon's lifeless jaws still bristled with row upon row of lethal 9-inch fangs. Jonas lay in total darkness, save for the twisting exterior light of the pod. The jaws were locked open, but not hyperextended, leaving the gates of hell at less than half their potential diameter. Jonas held tight as countless primeval teeth leapt at him. Whack! Jonas grimaced as the Lexan pod wedged sideways in between the half-closed jaws. The vessel was horizontal, immobilized between the razor-sharp points of the creature's upper and lower teeth. Failing to clear the open maw, the pod and its reluctant pilot were held captive within the locked jaws of their dead host, as its 40,000-pound frame plummeted hopelessly into the abyss.